Well, good Monday morning, 2 minutes past 10 o'clock. We're at 75 degrees, and it's time for another edition of KRIM's Community Spotlight. And with us today, going to be talking about Casa, the court-appointed special advocates, and with us, the Casa coordinator, Mariah Lance, with us. And first of all, Mariah, thanks for coming down and being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you betcha. Now, you took over as the coordinator just a few months back, right?
Back in January.
January, right? And so how's that whole transition been going so far?
It's been going really good.
Good. Now, for people that aren't familiar with Casa, first of all, can you give us kind of the Reader's Digest condensed version of what Casa is all about?
Yeah, so we're a group of volunteers who advocate for children who are placed out of home due to abuse or neglect and have involvement with the juvenile court system.
Mm-hmm.
We advocate for their safety and their best interest, and also to help them achieve permanency.
Outstanding. And now you've actually been involved with Casa for a few years, though, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And we were talking a little bit before the show today, having been fairly familiar with Casa myself. I mean, it's got to be, in some ways, kind of sad, some of the things that you see, but what an amazing opportunity to make a profound difference in the life of these kids. I mean, this is really a great opportunity for people to get involved in something pretty meaningful.
It is. So the Casa volunteers a lot of times are the one consistent person that a child in foster care have.
Mm-hmm. And so when a kid goes into foster care, well, I mean, there's so many different, again, I'm sure each story is a little different, but there's a lot of different things that need to be kept track of, and this Casa volunteer, again, court-appointed special advocate, I mean, this person, profoundly important as far as getting a finger on the pulse of what's going on in the child's life and being able to advocate on their behalf. I mean, that's there's a lot of moving parts to that.
Yeah, so the volunteers do keep track of the children's education, behavioral health, medical, dental, and then report back to the court on all of those things, along with how the child is just adjusting with all the changes they're going through.
Wow. And now to kind of set the stage for this, how many children total in Gila County, because this is managed kind of county by county, when we talk about Gila County itself, how many kids currently are first of all, how many of them have Casa volunteers, and how many of them still are waiting for one?
So right now we have 116 kids in Gila County that are in need of a Casa volunteer, and we have just over 80 kids that are currently being served by a Casa volunteer.
So the needs are significant.
Yes.
And if someone wanted to volunteer for this, now there's a little bit of training involved, right?
Correct.
And how long does that typically take?
It's 30 hours of pre-service training, so part of that is in person with myself, or if you're in Globe with Emily, our Casa coordinator down there.
Mm-hmm.
And then a big portion of it is either in person or virtual with our state Casa program.
Right. And so, and these are, excuse me, these trainings are just getting you focused on what you need to be looking at, paying attention to, and how the different things are reported and that type of thing, right?
Correct. Yeah, to help you understand the dependency process and the court system and some of those things that most people are not familiar with.
And if I wanted to volunteer, about how many hours a week or a month would I be volunteering for something like this?
The average is 10 to 15 hours a month, and it varies depending on how many kids are in the case and if you have one case or two cases.
There you go. So, 10 to 15 hours a month, that could fit into just about anybody's schedule.
Yes, we have several volunteers that are retired, and we have volunteers that are full-time students and full-time working. Some of our volunteers are single parents. They come from a lot of different areas in life.
Wow, interesting. And so obviously there's a need to get more people signed up. From the time you sign up, and these, what do you say, it was 30 hours of training?
Correct.
And that's, is that spread over how long a period of time?
That depends. If you do the training in person, it's generally spread out over about a week's worth of time.
Mm-hmm.
Virtually, it's spread out over a month.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So, again, not a big time commitment, but what a huge difference you could make in the life of some of these kids. Because I know some of the stories that I've heard, I mean, they really tug at the heartstrings, and thank God there are people that volunteer, because, I mean, you're really standing in a pretty significant gap for these kids.
Yes.
Now, the What's the average of the people that are involved in Casa currently? Do most of them just have one child that they're advocating for, or do some of them have multiple? Or I mean, what's the norm, if there is such a thing?
The average is probably 2 to 3 kids.
Right.
We do have some Casa volunteers who only have one child, and some of them have up to 8 children.
Wow. So it just depends on how much time you have to spend and all of that.
Correct.
And so what if all right, I go through the training, and the next step is just setting up a time to meet with the child, and I assume that those meetings can go a lot of different directions.
Correct. So after training, we do what we call a case matching meeting, where the new volunteer sits down with the Casa coordinator, and they get kind of a high overview of all the open cases that need a Casa for that person to work on deciding what's the best fit for them. After they pick a case, then the first step is actually meeting with the Department of Child Safety to ask all the questions that they have about the case, and to review the file so they have all the background information prior to meeting to the child and the foster parent.
Now, what about the kids that still need a Casa volunteer but don't have them? I mean, they're just kind of in a hurry up and wait mode then.
They are, unfortunately. We always have more children in care than we have volunteers available to help them.
And that's a sad bit of truth there. The again, not a lot of time necessary to get trained up for this. Not a lot of monthly ongoing time commitment, but again, a chance to make a really significant difference in the life of some of these children. When it comes down to the kids that still are hoping for a volunteer, is there no one really advocating on their behalf at all then at that point?
Every child that's involved in a dependency is assigned an attorney. So they do have an attorney who speaks for their desires and their wishes. Some children, depending on their age or maybe their developmental abilities, they may get a guardian ad litem assigned through the courts if there's no CASA available, and they may not understand their own safety and why it's not safe to return home yet, so they need that additional person to speak up for them.
Well, that's amazing work. So again, now if someone wants to learn more, they want to get involved, what's the best way for them to get the ball rolling?
So they can call our office at 928-474-7145, or they can visit our website, which is casaofgilacounty.org.
Easy enough. I know we can't talk specifics as far as these kids, but the little bit that I remember about Casa a number of years ago when I was more involved with that, again, some of these kids have really been through some rough things, and this is a wonderful opportunity to make a positive difference in their lives. It's got to be very gratifying for the people that are volunteering for this. So I would think that it'd be hard to find anything more gratifying than being able to make that kind of a difference in a kid's life.
Yeah, I was actually in a conference call just a couple weeks ago with one of our CASA volunteers and a child, and when it was the child's turn to ask questions of the team, his only question was, when's my CASA coming back? I just saw her last week, but I'm ready for her to come back and visit.
So, obviously they like the fact that here's someone that's concerned about me and taking up my personal best interest. That's got to be a gratifying thing for the kid too.
Yeah, it gives them that voice, and they understand that them being able to talk to the CASA openly and tell them what's going on and what they really want is how they get to where they can feel safe again.
Right. Wow. Interesting. And again, how many more kids need CASA volunteers than that don't have any currently?
Right now we have 116 kiddos without a volunteer to advocate for them.
Wow. And how does that break down around the county?
So that means we have about, I think we have 40 kids in Payson right now that are in need of a CASA, and the remaining kids are down in Globe.
Okay, so and is it possible for if someone here in Payson wanted to volunteer and take on a child down in Globe, is that feasible?
It is. We actually have a couple of volunteers from the Payson area who have globe cases. We also have volunteers that live part-time in Gila County and part-time in other counties that help out with kiddos that are no longer able to stay in the Payson area.
Right. And I remember in talking just before the show today, you mentioned that fuel costs and everything, if you had to do that kind of transit back and forth, can actually be covered financially.
Correct. The Casa program does get some funds through a grant to help cover the cost when children are placed out of county to allow the volunteers to still make that personal connection with them.
Very good. And so when it comes to these kids, if, whatever the reason was that they're placed in foster care, I'm trying to not get specific about specific cases or anything, but there's a lot of different things going on in these kids' lives, and to think of some of these kids going through this without anybody speaking on their behalf, for the most part, or getting to know, even if you have an attorney assigned to you, the attorney only has so much time in front of that kid to really get to know him, whereas a CASA volunteer might have a little bit easier time getting their finger on the pulse of this kid's life. Obviously, we need to get a lot more people signed up, and this isn't unique just to Gila County. This is all across the country.
Correct. There's a nationwide program.
Right, and golly, and when you look at just the numbers need right here in Gila County, and then you think about what kind of needs there are across the country. I mean, this is dealing with the lives of a huge number of young people.
Correct.
Very cool. So what as you got involved, what was the biggest surprise for you? There had to be some moment where, wow, I never saw that coming.
I think the biggest surprise is how resilient these children are. With everything that we know they went through, hearing their backstories, and then even as they get comfortable with people hearing more of that backstory, and just being able to see how they're able to move forward and get themselves to a positive place again where they can move forward with their education and stay in school and go from having temper tantrums to having normal age appropriate activities and behaviors.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And how long is the typical relationship between a volunteer and one of these kiddos? Obviously some of these could go on for, I guess, a long period of time, right?
They can. So some cases do go on for 2 to 3 years, sometimes longer. We do have some volunteers that are able to maintain that connection all the way up into adulthood. We have some CASA volunteers that have been doing this for many years and have contact still with their old CASA children who are now adults and having families of their own, and they get updates from them.
Because I imagine, especially for the child, these people become a lot like family. I mean, they're one of the only people that was paying attention and speaking up for me and stuff like that. So I imagine the bond can be pretty heavy.
It can.
Oh, that's beautiful. Now again, the time commitment is not that terribly difficult to deal with. The need is profound. And you mentioned that some of these kids, even after they become adults, they're still staying in touch with their CASA volunteers. I mean, I think that speaks volumes right there.
Yes.
Now, did you start out as a CASA volunteer to begin with in this?
I did not. I actually was working for a child welfare agency and was familiar with the CASA program, and that's how I found out about the job opening and applied.
Very interesting. And now, as far as this last year or two with all this COVID-19 stuff going on, has that changed the way, as far as the CASA volunteers getting in touch with their kids and that type of thing? Has that been a challenge?
It definitely changed it. I don't know if it made it a challenge. In some ways, it has provided our rural community the ability to more easily connect with the people involved in these dependencies. We now are able to use virtual platforms like Zoom and Microsoft Teams or even Facebook to stay connected with the children in the cases without having to drive hours to meet with them.
And I would think that kids have certainly been getting mentored up on this just as far as school and everything, as far as the teleconferencing software platforms and different things like that. So it's I know we were talking a little bit before the show today, and you know, when you look at like telemedicine and things like that, that maybe didn't have a huge adoption rate before, you know, by physicians before the pandemic. Boy, they certainly have adopted it now, and I know a couple of them have said, you know, that they don't see ever going back. I mean, this is actually a wonderful new thing. And I would think the same would probably be true with the Casa program as well, in that you know, a lot of people may not have been involved with teleconferencing stuff before, but now they didn't have a choice, they had to, and I bet you it's opened up some interesting doors.
It has. Not only are we able to stay connected with the children and the foster families, but we can attend court virtually.
Oh wow, that makes sense. So, and it, again, makes the whole thing that much easier too to fit into your schedule. If you know you need to be in one place, but the court proceeding is taking place at another location, you can still be a part of that. That makes a lot of sense. So, is there a certain type of person that gets involved as a court-appointed special advocate?
Just one with a big heart who wants to make sure that our children in our community are safe.
Yeah. And talk about helping make sure that these kids don't slip between, you know, through the cracks, so to speak. I can't think of too many programs that would, you know, fit that better than the Casa program. How long has Casa been around?
Casa of Arizona last year celebrated its 35th anniversary.
Wow, 35 years. What a wonderful thing. And I imagine the needs do nothing but grow.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Now one of the things we were just chatting about before the show today too that I thought was curious was that you know, with all of the kids, you know, for the last year and a half or so, you know, having to do distance learning, not be able to do in-person classes at school and stuff like that, which for many kids is their ticket away from maybe a negative environment or something. You know, I would have thought that it would have had a real deleterious impact on these kids, but it sounds like really the numbers this year have gone down a little.
They have. Last year we saw a record high of over 75 dependencies in Gila County filed. So far this year we're just under 30 dependencies. Part of that change is the Department of Child Safety working with the parents to be able to put a safe plan in place to keep the children with the parents.
Wow, interesting. So again, this program has been around for a long time. The training, obviously, I mean, we had 35 years of working on this, so you know, they've got it figured out, and it might sound you know, scary and things like that if you've never been involved in something like this, but really they've done a lot of the work to get you exactly what you need to do a good job. So again, we'll repeat the phone number and the website here again in a minute, but we hope you'll write it down and consider becoming a volunteer with Casa. Now, how many Casa volunteers do we have right here in Payson currently?
In Payson currently we have 23 Casa volunteers.
23, but still a need for a bunch more.
Yes.
And possibly, I mean, there's like you mentioned before, a big need down in southern Gila County, but I imagine the kids that are in need of Casa volunteers probably all across the county as well. I mean, Tonto Basin, down to Globe and everywhere else.
Correct.
Now, I find it curious that we were talking before the show today too, that there's a significant need in southern Gila County that seems like it kind of outpaces the need here in Payson. Do we know why that is?
There's a different demographics. The Payson area, we have a lot more people with free time and looking for volunteer positions than we do in Globe. But again, that 10 to 15 hours a month is not much. We have a lot of volunteers who do work full time and still take care of their family and go to school and find that time to help advocate for a child in need.
Right. So as far as the mandates, I'm assuming you have to be at least 18 or 21? 21, that makes sense. And any other specific criteria that they have to meet?
Just got to pass a criminal background check, so we just look to make sure that any Casa volunteers don't have prior child abuse or neglect charges,
Right.
and make sure that they are safe to be around the children.
Makes sense. Again, some of these volunteers have taken on multiple kids. I think you mentioned you had one volunteer that was doing up to, what was it, 8 kids?
8 children.
Wow. I mean, what a wonderful way to give back.
Yes.
And it really does make a difference in your community too, as far as obviously kids that slip between the cracks. A lot of other negative things can come out of that, and so this is a great way to make a truly lasting difference in some of these kids. Again, if there's a lot of information that you can get off the website, right? Just as far as general information.
Correct.
And that web address again is?
CasaofGilaCounty.org.
Outstanding. And again, if you'd like to, just call Mariah, and if you have some questions, where can they contact you again?
928-474-7145.
Outstanding. Again, we've been talking with Mariah Lance this morning from the court-appointed special advocates. Now, you are, your office is actually over in the courthouse here in Payson?
Correct.
And then your counterpart down in southern Gila County, probably at the courthouse in Gila, or in Globe too, right?
She's actually right now in the probation office, which is
Okay.
right next to the courthouse
Right,
down in
right.
Globe.
Okay, and again, they need people to volunteer here, down there, and everywhere in between. So again, we hope that you'll consider giving Mariah a call. Check out the website to get more information. And Mariah, again, thanks for coming down and being with us today. We appreciate it. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
You betcha. Gonna get you back to more of your favorite music. Have some tunes coming up from Roy Orbison, Led Zeppelin, the Abbott Brothers, and a whole bunch more. But first, a quick look at Rim Country weather.
All of tonight's KRIM weather forecast for Payson and surrounding
Tonight's
areas.
weather?
Forecasting around the sky.
That didn't sound right.
A warming trend